Dr. Elizabeth Johnson is here from Wahroonga. Elizabeth has health expertise as a local GP and also concerns as a mum of 3 kids who will be living close to the stack and as a local community member. So when you're ready, Elizabeth, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for having me here. My name is Elizabeth Johnson and I'm from CAPS. Now, we're a Wahroonga-based group, and much of what I speak about tonight will look at specifically how Wahroonga will be affected. But for those of you living around West Pennant Hills, you'll have similar issues and you'll be able to easily extrapolate out. Now, the Wahroonga-based group is against the unfiltered exhaust stacks and portals in residential areas. We also have other concerns, specifically the health impacts from the poor in-tunnel air quality and the construction impacts. Now, the environmental impact statements, don't worry about the construction, it's temporary, it's only 5 years. But for those of us that actually have to live for those 5 years with all that construction, that's actually very, very significant, and it doesn't feel very temporary when you hear ju, 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 ju for 5 years. Now, I just want to state that we don't have any political affiliations. We're very keen to work with all members and all political parties to bring about positive change for NorthConnex. But we passionately believe that unsolicited should not mean unsafe in New South Wales. So let's just look at the 2008 NHMRC document, Air Quality in and Around Tunnels. Now, that document stated that one of the great advantages of road tunnels is the opportunity to deliberately site portals or stacks away from sensitive receptors so that road transport emissions may be removed from dense residential areas, improving local air quality. So that means if you currently live in Normanhurst or Thornlea or Pennant Hills, and we reduce the number of trucks and cars going past your house, that's great, you're a winner. And what we can do is we can then take the pollution somewhere else. So if you had it in the back of an industrial area or an unused bushland or something, then that'd be great. But what NorthConnex has done is put a stack in West Pennant Hills and a stack in Wahroonga about 50 metres from people's houses. So there will be some winners in this project, but there will also be a lot of losers. So the issues are emissions from portals, so that's the tunnel exits, and I'll be speaking about that because they have significant health consequences for us. I'll be speaking about the pollution from stacks and how that will affect our health, the in-tunnel air quality and how that is a risk for people who are actually going to be using this tunnel, and how there is no filtration. And when the issue of filtration, because I know a lot of you are concerned about this, was put to Tim Parker, who's the RMS project manager for the NorthConnex, he said, filtration does not represent value for money. Now, to put it in context, this is Winona Avenue. So this is where this stack's going to go. So this grey house here, that's going to be demolished. And in its place will be a stack that carries with it 9 kilometres of pollution from predominantly big diesel trucks. And that stack's going to be about 15 metres high, and there'll be a portal there, a tunnel exit there as well. And what you can see from this picture is there's actually a fence there, which means people actually live there. So these people here will look out of their lounge room windows every morning, and there'll be a reminder, a 15-metre reminder, that they have 9 kilometres worth of diesel truck pollution spewing all over them. Now, let's just take a moment to talk about portal emissions. Now, portal emissions are what's actually emitted from the tunnel exits. So you've got the trucks and the cars dragging the clean air in through one end of the tunnel. They pollute the tunnel as they go. And then naturally what's going to happen is those same trucks and cars are going to be dragging the pollution out the other end. Now, portal emissions are really dangerous because they're undiluted, they're unfiltered, and they're at ground level. Now, theoretically, this tunnel is to have no portal emissions. However, when NorthConnex have been approached about this, they have categorically refused to say that there will not be portal emissions in the future. So it's a case of no portal emissions for now. Now, in the M5 East Tunnel, there is a provision under the Department of Planning that said that there would be no portal emissions under normal operational conditions. However, those that were running the tunnel took that to mean that when there was increased traffic levels, if there was a bit of a breakdown, if there was an accident, if there was maintenance works, if it was Tuesday afternoon and they had to have a tea break, that wasn't considered normal operational conditions, and there were portal emissions, unbeknownst to the people who actually lived around those portals. And portal emissions are known to significantly affect air quality for a couple of 100 metres. Now the engineers, and Mehreen, you can speak about this, will always say it's very difficult to capture all those emissions being dragged by those trucks and cars. Now, because we've got portals so close to where people live, they won't have any of the jet fans closer than 300 metres from the tunnel exits, because if they do, then it's going to be a huge noise issue. So you're relying on jet fans that are 300 metres away to capture all of these pollutants. And the question is how practical is that? Now the other issue is that not all vehicles are the same. So these big diesel trucks actually produce 30 to 50 times the amount of pollution as one car. Now this is a huge problem because in the EIS they assumed that all the trucks going through the tunnel were just 23-tonne trucks, when if you actually go onto the overhead bridges that pass the F3, you'll notice that a lot of the trucks are bigger than that, and they haven't been modelled and they haven't been used. So there's concerns that the amount of pollution that's produced in these tunnels has been completely underestimated by the EIS. Because let's not forget, most of the vehicles that will be using this tunnel will be these big diesel trucks. We've also underestimated the breakdown scenario. So they were forced to have a situation where, you know, what's the worst case scenario here? How much pollution can possibly come from this tunnel? And they've used a breakdown scenario which had all the cars and trucks stopped. So there's a major accident and you just sit there idling. But you know, when your car is idling, it actually doesn't produce anywhere near as much pollution as that stop-start, you know, accelerated brake, accelerated brake, accelerated brake. So if they'd been in any way legit, they should have had their breakdown scenario as, you know, having two lanes merging into one, and that whole, you know, stop, start, the whole, you know, Boxing Day scenario when, you know, someone blows a tyre at the 9-kilometre mark. That would have been much more appropriate. And they've underestimated traffic volumes, and basically all their scenarios show best case scenario. So how bad is the stack and how much should we worry? NorthConnex believe in the magical dispersion theory. And what that is you have 9 kilometres worth of pollution, big diesel trucks, and you shoot it out at one point through a stack that's 15 metres above the street level. And that pollution is just going to magically disappear, regardless of what the weather is, regardless of how many diesel trucks are in that tunnel. It doesn't matter what time of the day or night or under what conditions, it will all just disappear, and none of us will be any worse off because you just won't be able to measure it anywhere where it reaches the ground. And that just doesn't make logical sense. So the issues are, and how close to the magical dispersion theory we get comes down to the quantity of pollutants emitted, how good your dispersion is. Obviously, if you've got a very windy conditions, then things are going to disperse a lot more than if it's still. And that comes down to your meteorological conditions. And also the topography of the region. So if you have as in the case of Virunga, we've got 15-metre stack in a gentle valley. Now, dispersion's not going to occur half as much as if you had a 60-metre stack on the top of a mountain. Now, the Department of Health
Could I just ask you to explain us the way they actually do their modelling, so people know?
We'll come to that in terms of their air pollution modelling. We'll come to that. So, look, what the Department of Health have suggested is that one way of improving dispersion is actually to increase the size of these stacks. And as you can see from this diagram, if you have a bigger stack, the pollution's got further to travel. Some people suggested that a 60 to 80 metre stack might be more appropriate, which would improve dispersion. I mean, you'd be able to see the stack from Penrith, but, you know, and what we forget is that these are being put in residential areas. West Pennant Hills, Virunga, we've got people living within 50 metres of this stack. Is it appropriate to have industrial chimneys where people live? Now, this is a great diagram of what happens when dispersion doesn't happen and you get plume strike. So, if you live there, or you send your kids to school there, or you live about here, then you're going to be copying all of these pollutants, and that's going to have massive effects on your health. Now, this is the issue that Steve raised, and that is the clean air going into the tunnel. So the model is put clean air in, add a whole lot of pollution from 9 kilometres worth of diesel trucks, and throw it out at the end at the stack, and come out with a solution that says, oh, I'm sure it'll all be okay. Now, the air pollution data that they got, their background air pollution data, was from Prospect, residential Prospect, and residential Linfield. Now, if you're in Wahroonga, that clean air is actually the corner of the M2 and Pennant Hills Road. So it's actually a fair bit more polluted than Prospect. Now, some of the NorthConnex people have said, oh, no, we did take that into account. And others say, oh, actually, no, we didn't. And no one can actually tell us what modelling they've done. But if they have used Prospect data and put that in as clean air, as the clean air coming from the M2 and Pennant Hills Road, they've completely underestimated the amount of stuff that's going to be spewed out 9 kilometres later. Now, the other huge issue is the terrain data. So in Wahroonga, we've got the 15-metre stack. It's in a gentle valley. Now, the computer modelling that they used had a relative error of 6 metres. Now, if you've got an 80-metre industrial stack in a desert, then plus or minus 6 metres is probably not that significant when it comes to what's coming out and what's going to fall to the ground. But when you've got a potential error of 6 metres on a 15-metre stack in a gentle valley, that's pretty significant. There are actually computer programs that will give you an accuracy of about plus or minus 10 centimetres, but we didn't use that. Now, this data, if you're getting inaccurate 3D models, that's really significant because it can really affect your weather data, which I'll come to shortly. So it can have a compounding effect. Now, the weather data is astounding. They haven't actually taken any local weather data from West Pennant Hills or Wahroonga. Instead, they've gone to Terry Hills, Linfield, Richmond, Prospect and Sydney Airport, plugged those data points in, pressed go on the computer and come up with an answer that says that Wahroonga is probably the windiest place in all of New South Wales, closely followed by West Pennant Hills. Now, for those of you living in either Wahroonga or West Pennant Hills, you realise those suburbs are not great kite-flying suburbs. Now, they have said that Wahroonga is calm 0.5% of the time. West Pennant Hills is calm 1 to 3% of the time. And that's really important because if it's windy, then things will disperse. If it's calm, it won't. It's just going to sit there. Now, in comparison, Linfield is calm 10 to 60% of the time. And even Terry Hills was calm 3 to 5% of the time, which is significantly more than the Wahroonga data. Now, those of us that live in Wahroonga didn't believe this, so we went and sought out some amateur weather station data. The closest that we could get to the Terry Hills point was a weather station in Davidson, which is reasonably close to Terry Hills. But we managed to get data from Winona Avenue, Wahroonga, about 200 metres from the stack. And these amateur weather guys, they collect really comprehensive data that can go on for years. So you can get, it's amateur, but there's a whole list of regulations that they still need to follow. And in the absence of any proper data from NorthConnex, it's quite reasonable. And what you can see from that graph is in Davidson, actually gets windy sometimes. Winona Avenue, not so much. So we dispute the suggestion that Winona Avenue is always windy because that's not what we've got from our scientific data. Now, the other thing, which CAP's probably a little bit late to the party on because we've been concentrating on what's going to happen in our community in Wahroonga. But what we've been astounded by is just the quality of the air within the tunnel. So this is a longitudinally ventilated tunnel, so it means that cars and trucks come in, they drag the clean air from the prospect data in with them, they pollute for 9 kilometres. They've got jet fans at the top which will mix the air as it goes, plus a little bit of the piston effect. And then they'll have the pollution will leave via the stacks at either end of the tunnel. But you'll have the pollution level rising progressively. And in the cases where you're travelling at 20 kilometres an hour rather than the speed limit, you'll find that you get to you'll have higher levels of exhaust and higher levels of pollution. So if we can just look at this graph here, this is particulate matter 2.5, PM 2.5. And I'll come to some of the specifics of PM 2.5 later. But the point that's probably important for everyone to realise is this point here. Okay, so that's 300 micrograms per cubic metre. And the blue line represents what's going to happen in opening, and the orange line represents what's going to happen 10 years later in 2029. And this is sort of as we go. So by about the 4 kilometre mark, you reach that at 2029. It's about 5 kilometres at opening of the tunnel. Now, that's significant because there's medical research to suggest that once you get to that magic 300 micrograms per metre of particulate matter, that you will actually, you're more likely to have ischemic events if you've got stable heart disease. So, in other words, it's more likely to precipitate a heart attack. The nitrogen dioxide levels towards the end of the tunnel are also quite dangerous, and you can go back to medical research which suggests that by the time you get to the 7, 8, 9 kilometre mark, you're more likely to have an asthma attack if you have mild asthma, especially if there's any delay in the tunnel and you're stuck there because there's a breakdown or what have you. Now, NorthConnex has said, no, in our tunnel, traffic won't stop. There will be no breakdowns. There will be no accidents. We said, yes, but what? Just humour me. What if there was? So look, don't worry. Just wind up your windows, says Tim Parker, and put your air conditioning on recirculate. Now, this is a quote from the RMS project manager of this $3 billion project, and the best we can do is wind up your windows. I mean, this is half a step better than please just hold your breath. And if you've got a 3-year-old asthmatic in the back of your car, or your unwell mother-in-law who's got a bit of, of heart disease, this is really significant. Now, the other issue is that diesel exhaust has got a huge number of toxic compounds that it emits. But the EIS is only modelling, and they're only measuring a select few, about half a dozen. One of the things that they are measuring, though, is PM 2.5. Now, people are calling this the asbestos of the 21st century. This is serious stuff. It is known to cause or to aggravate lung diseases such as asthma, heart attacks and abnormal rhythms, low birth weight, prematurity, lung cancers, premature death, chronic diseases such as diabetes. So this is not something that you want to muck around with. And the scary thing about PM 2.5 is there's no threshold. So it's not like so long as you don't breathe in more than X, you'll be okay. Because as you can see from this graph, it doesn't matter how, anything above 0 is potentially dangerous. So it's a bit like saying, it's okay, I'm only smoking 3 cigarettes a day, I'll be okay. Well, no, there is no such thing as a safe cigarette level, and equally there's no such thing as a safe PM levels. And one of the flyers that has been handed out tonight shows that PM 2.5 will actually increase in Wollonga and in West Pennant Hills, even using all their dodgy modelling. So it really worries me that if you just actually start using correct modelling, how bad that effect will be. So, assuming that the tunnel is inevitable, CAPS believe that the stacks and the portals need to be moved from residential areas. Now, Wahroonga is lucky because of where we're situated geographically, in that as soon as you travel north of Wahroonga, the population density really drops off. Now, if you put the portals or the tunnel exit about 2 kilometres further north, just north of the Asquith industrial area, you could ensure that there were no houses for about 300 metres. And that's really significant because portal emissions will affect air quality for less than that. And then you could vent the stack within to the adjacent bushland, And it would be possible to have no house for more than 1 kilometre away, which would give people a buffer. Now, those in West Pennant Hills won't have that luxury just because of their geography. But there is a golf course which would give people a buffer. And there is the issue of filtration, which of course nobody wants to get into because it doesn't represent value for money. Now, what can you do to support CAPS? We've got a paper petition going asking that the stacks and pools be moved from residential areas. At last count, we had 8,293 signatures. We need 10,000 signatures in order for it to be tabled in Parliament and for it to be debated. So if you haven't already done so, I ask you to sign our petition on the way out. We also have a separate change.org petition. So if you go home and Google change.org, and if you put into the search bracket NorthConnex, the CAPS petition will come up. I'd encourage you all to sign that and to forward that on to all your friends and colleagues. Email your local politician, email my bed. We need to keep up the political pressure here. And for more information about CAPS, we've got a website, www.capsgroup.org, and there's also a Facebook page, Stop the Stacks.